In the high-stakes world of the British monarchy, power is rarely stripped away with shouting or public scandals. It is taken in absolute silence behind closed doors through a single administrative update that changes everything in an instant. What Camilla just realized as she stood in the royal enclosure surrounded by the flashing cameras of the global press is that the grand illusion of her absolute authority has finally shattered. She had arrived expecting the ultimate display of her supreme status, but instead, she was met with a devastating institutional reckoning that left her completely exposed. This is the story of a silent, ruthless retaliation that she never saw coming. A moment where the weaponization of administrative protocol dismantled a 30-year game of patience and manipulation. What this video will unpack is the hidden warfare currently unfolding within the highest levels of the palace walls, exposing a secret power grab that backfired spectacularly. We will look at how Prince William and Princess Anne orchestrated a flawless, quiet counteroffensive that caught the Queen entirely off guard. You will see exactly how a series of seemingly routine administrative changes effectively stripped Camilla of her long-term leverage, forcing her to confront a reality she has spent decades trying to avoid. By the end of this analysis, you will understand the profound psychological shift taking place inside the institution, where the illusion of absolute power has collided head-on with a harsh state of commercial desperation. To understand how this trap snapped shut, we must first look at the immense fortress of influence Camilla believed she had successfully built around herself right before the collapse. For more than 30 years, her journey has been defined by a relentless, calculated patience, slowly navigating her way from the deep shadows of royal scandal into the very heart of the monarchy. She successfully managed the systematic erasure of Princess Diana's legacy from the daily operations of the firm, subtly reshaping public perception and securing the crown many thought she would never wear. As queen, she increasingly operated with a sense of total security, believing that her absolute emotional control over King Charles made her entirely untouchable. With this perceived immunity, she began pushing the boundaries of her position, attempting to elevate her own non-royal children and secure their permanent status within the institutional framework. This unspoken ambition created an atmosphere of supreme confidence, where she assumed that the blood royals would simply acquiesce to her rewriting of the family hierarchy. She believed she had orchestrated the perfect transition of power, one where her family would enjoy the permanent luxuries of the state without bearing any of its historical burdens. It was an intoxicating moment of triumph, a belief that she had successfully outmaneuvered the ancient traditions of the British crown. The catalyst for her sudden downfall came down to a specific choice that exposed her deep-seated arrogance and her fundamental misunderstanding of royal loyalty. When news emerged that King Charles and Camilla would be leaving the wedding of Peter Phillips, the son of Princess Anne, early to attend the glamour of the Epsom Derby, it was presented to the public as a simple scheduling conflict. But behind palace doors, it was viewed as a declaration of supreme dominance. Camilla had chosen the high-profile media cameras and the elite social standing of the racecourse over a deeply personal family event for Princess Anne. She believed she could openly marginalize the immediate family of the king's sister without facing any consequences, showing the world that her preferences took absolute priority over familial obligation. This was the moment her ambition shifted from a quiet background influence into an overt public insult to the bloodline. What Camilla failed to realize was that her actions had crossed a definitive red line for both Princess Anne and Prince William. William, who now controls the vast wealth, land, and estates of the Duchy of Cornwall, had been quietly monitoring a subtle paper trail of administrative requests coming from the Queen's office. For months, there had been a quiet effort to secure permanent residential access, high-level funding, and lifelong security protocols for Camilla's extended family, utilizing crown resources that were traditionally reserved strictly for working royals. When Camilla chose to publicly snub Princess Anne's family at the wedding, it provided the perfect catalyst for a unified institutional response. William and Anne realized that this was not just a breach of etiquette, but a calculated attempt to test the boundaries of her authority and establish a dangerous precedent of non-royal entitlement to the sovereign's wealth. The retaliation was executed with cold administrative precision, utilizing the weaponization of protocol rather than public confrontation. While Camilla was preparing for her grand appearance at the racecourse, enjoying the illusion of her absolute power, the machinery of the crown was silently moving against her. William issued a series of structural directives regarding the management of royal properties and the distribution of discretionary funds. Without a single public argument, the access passes for Camilla's personal staff were subtly revised, and certain private royal suites that she had earmarked for her family's long-term use were designated as restricted institutional spaces. When her inner circle attempted to access these resources, they found the doors literally and metaphorically locked, redirected to a side entrance that carried a devastating, deeper meaning. The message from the Prince of Wales was unmistakable, delivered not through anger, but through the absolute authority of the ledger. As the reality of this silent coup began to dawn on Camilla during her public appearance, a profound panic replaced her initial confidence. She suddenly recognized that the vast wealth, the grand estates, and the historical prestige she thought she commanded did not belong to her, nor would they ever be hers to distribute. In a state of growing desperation, she turned to the one person who had always protected her, demanding that King Charles intervene and overturn the restrictions imposed by his son. But as she looked for validation, she was met with a devastating, icy silence that changed the reading of everything. The trap had completely snapped shut, leaving her isolated within the very system she thought she had conquered, and setting the stage for an ultimate confrontation over the true ownership of the royal legacy. That devastating silence from King Charles was not a sudden lapse in affection, but the cold, calculated awakening of a monarch who realizes that the survival of the institution must always supersede personal domestic peace. For decades, Charles had been the shield that protected Camilla from the fierce winds of public disapproval and internal palace resistance. But when confronted with a direct administrative line drawn by his son and heir, the king was forced to look at the stark mathematical reality of the crown's future. He understood that his own legacy is entirely dependent on a smooth, uncontested transition to Prince William and Princess Wales. To overturn William's directives would be to ignite an internal civil war that the current reign simply cannot afford to wage, especially during a period defined by immense vulnerability and transition. When forced to choose between the enduring stability of the bloodline and the immediate ambitions of his consort, the ancient machinery of the monarchy automatically corrects itself, leaving the queen to face the realization that her protective shield has vanished. What appears to be true in this psychological climax is that Camilla completely misjudged the nature of her influence over the sovereign. She had mistaken Charles's deep emotional reliance on her for a mandate to reshape the structural future of the family. The king's refusal to intervene was an explicit demonstration of the limits of her power, a silent reminder that while she may share his bed and wear the crown, she does not inherit the sovereign authority of the bloodline. This moment marks a profound shift in the balance of power within the palace walls, where the king's silence serves as an implicit endorsement of his son's defensive maneuvers. It is the ultimate domestic betrayal delivered not with angry words, but with an absolute refusal to pick up the phone or sign the overriding decree. This brings us to the core of the crisis, a state of profound commercial desperation that Camilla is now forced to navigate behind the public smiles. The grand illusion of royal life often masks a very strict legal and financial reality that is currently weaponized against her. Camilla owns no sovereign land controls, no independent crown revenues, and holds no personal equity in the vast estates that define British royal power. Sandringham, Balmoral, Buckingham Palace, and the immense wealth of the Duchy of Cornwall do not belong to her, nor will they ever. The entire financial architecture of the monarchy is designed to pass seamlessly from monarch to heir to avoid the devastating impact of inheritance taxes and the fragmentation of the estate. Every luxury Camilla enjoys, from the state cars to the private apartments, is effectively an institutional lease that is completely dependent on the goodwill of the reigning sovereign and the future king. This detail matters immensely because it exposes the ticking clock that governs her current strategy. What viewers noticed during recent public engagements is a subtle heightened urgency in her administrative office, a desperate push to secure independent trusts, foundations, and commercial footprints. This is the definition of commercial desperation, the sudden and terrifying awareness that when the current reign inevitably concludes, the Dowager Queen's structural influence drops to absolute zero. Without the protection of the sovereign's active pen, she becomes an institutional tenant, entirely reliant on the financial benevolence of King William. By locking down the discretionary funds and limiting her family's access to crown resources now, William has essentially cut off her ability to build an independent financial fortress before that transition occurs. This silent offensive is not merely about protecting the treasury. It is about the systematic restoration of a legacy that many believed had been permanently erased. For Prince William, every administrative rollback, every revoked pass, and every subtle boundary drawn around the crown's assets carries a deeply personal emotional weight. It represents the quiet, enduring vindication of his mother, Princess Diana, whose name and place in history had been systematically marginalized during Camilla's decades-long ascent. William has watched for years as the institution slowly accommodated the woman who caused his mother immense grief. And his current actions demonstrate that while he tolerated the compromise for the sake of his father, he will not allow that compromise to extend into the future of his own reign. This is the silent execution of a long-delayed justice, using the cold precision of royal protocol to dismantle the empire of influence Camilla spent 30 years constructing. At the same time, this strategic correction serves to secure the undisputed path for Princess Catherine, whose uncomplaining sacrifice and steady commitment to the state have made her the true emotional anchor of the modern monarchy. While Camilla's strategy has often relied on backroom maneuvering and calculated PR campaigns, Catherine has built her status on absolute institutional discipline and genuine public affection. The stark contrast between Camilla's commercial desperation and Catherine's dignified resilience has not been lost on the palace establishment or the public. By stripping Camilla of her long-term leverage, William and Princess Anne are ensuring that when Catherine eventually takes her place as queen, she will not have to contend with a rival non-royal court operating in the shadows. The institution is decisively choosing its future over its past, ensuring that the legacy of the bloodline remains pure and uncompromised. The forensic proof of this shifting power dynamic is visible to anyone who knows how to read the subtle clues embedded in royal protocol. Viewers have noted the careful repositioning of historic portraits within the palace corridors, the reemergence of symbolic jewelry tied directly to the late Queen Elizabeth II's strict standard of duty, and the sudden absence of Camilla's extended family from the immediate high-security perimeters of official state events. What looked like routine updates to guest lists and staff schedules were actually a total dismantling of her domestic empire. These are not accidental adjustments. They are calculated psychological signals meant to inform the inner circle that the tide has permanently turned. The message is clear: the era of concession is over, and the traditional boundaries of the crown are being rigorously enforced. As the monarchy looks toward an uncertain future, Camilla must now play out the remainder of this reign with the flawless composure required of her rank, while knowing that the structural foundation of her power has been completely eroded. She must stand before the flashing cameras, smile for the global press, and execute the public duties of a queen, all while recognizing that behind the closed doors of the palace, she is trapped within a framework she can no longer control. The ultimate tragedy of her ambition is that in reaching for the absolute peak of institutional authority, she overlooked the enduring power of the bloodline she sought to manage. The British Crown remains undefeated, quietly absorbing personal ambition, resetting its boundaries, and proving once again that true power belongs not to those who manipulate the system, but to those who embody its survival. If you found this deep analytical look into the hidden power dynamics of the royal family insightful, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments below on how these subtle shifts will shape the future of the British monarchy.